Welcome to Beyond Birth Trauma, From Burden to Brilliance, where we uncover the powerful truth about your beginnings and how they've shaped your entire life. I'm Shannon O'Flaherty, and in this show, we are not just exploring your birth, we are dismantling the chains of generational trauma. We're diving into the core of who you are, peeling back layers of inherited beliefs and behaviors that have held you back for far too long. This isn't just about understanding your past. It is about reclaiming your future. Get ready to break free. This is Beyond Birth Trauma, From Burden to Brilliance, and your transformation starts now. Hi, I'm Shannon O'Flaherty. Thank you so much for joining us on Beyond Birth Trauma, From Burden to Brilliance. And today I'm so excited to have my dear friend, Nancy Marie Forsyth, here with me. She is an accountant and former physical therapist who started her deep dive into self-development healing about 7 years ago when she began my class From Fear into Love online. And Nancy was also then became one of my coaches for From Fear into Love because she did more work than absolutely anyone. And I personally witnessed her transformation, and it was really, really very exciting. Nancy lives in Minnesota with her husband, daughter, and her sweet little dog. And growing up, this episode is about Nancy's story because growing up, she suffered from allergies and digestion issues. And working as a physical therapist in the past, Nancy saw firsthand how we can greatly impact our own body's abilities to heal. And she began to explore other possibilities of understanding the roots of her allergies. And then she heard me talking online in one of my Facebook Lives and was triggered when she heard me talk about the oath of silence. And she wondered, how could it all be related to losing her father as a baby? Now, I loved this when she first came to me because she was asking all the right kind of questions that I really love to deal with when people start connecting the dots of their wounding from childhood, their traumas, their issues. Why do I think this way? Why do I behave this way? Could allergies be related to grief and loss? I mean, these are fantastic questions because, as we know, it's not all just genetics, it's nurture and nature. And so Nancy started to work with me. And then when we started to work together and I saw how absolutely brilliant she was, I invited her to be a coach. Also because when holding space for a group in our online classes, I have one personality and I hold space in one way, and Nancy has a very different personality than I do. So I felt that we could hold space in a really wonderful way because we come from two very different perspectives. We almost always land on the same page, but we're getting there slightly different. So I'm still working with Nancy. Together, we've been going through stuff. And when my course is online, available just as a standalone course, Nancy will be taking one of the coaching calls during the month if people should upgrade to those. So thank you, Nancy, for this time. It's wonderful to have you here with me.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. And like Shannon said, I started my self-development journey about 7 years ago. And when she talked about breaking the oath of silence, it really hit home subconsciously. I didn't know why, but it was there. And that really motivated me to start Shannon's From Fear into Love class. And then, like Shannon said, my health issues of digestion and allergies also motivated me to see if I could find a link between like emotional and spiritual healing and health issues. So yeah, and it's been just an amazing journey going deeper and deeper. And yeah, so that's where I started. And then Go ahead.
It's great to have you here. I'm also recording from the homeland. I'm actually in the States now recording, so it's strange for me to be recording midday and not in the evening like it's shown in England. But so Nancy, when you were in, I mean, I know you had a lot of aha moments and discoveries and realizations during From Fear into Love. I think I witnessed all of them. But what happened, or what was your main sort of takeaway during or after From Fear into Love?
Yeah. So I would say after the first From Fear Until Love class, because I took it more than once,
You did all of them, I think.
I realized that I had deep abandonment and rejection wounds that needed healing.
Mhm.
And I needed to revisit the loss of my father. And I also needed to look at abandonment and rejection in relation to my father and in relation to my mother, who
So,
is still alive today.
so just bring everybody up to speed. When did you lose your dad?
Yeah. So I lost my dad when I was 3 months old. He
Right.
died of a alcohol overdose. And it was very sudden and obviously, and I was 3 months old, so I didn't have a fully formed identity or self yet. And so I was held by my mother a lot, and I also took on a lot of her grief and other emotions. And I also even came to realize I was holding my father's guilt. And so Shannon showed me in class how I could clear out not only my own emotions related to my father's death, but my mother's and my father's as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when our main caretaker dies, so even if you're adopted, if you're adoptive parents, or if you're living with your grandparents as your main caretakers, whoever your main caretakers are, but usually it's our parents. But when they die, even though they're not choosing to leave you, it could just be an accident, it does register in the baby as abandonment. And when the other parent doesn't have our back, and this is the same in abusive relationships too, if one parent is physically abusing you and the other parent isn't protecting you or doesn't have your back in some way, we can hate the non-abusive parent more because they're supposed to be there to protect us and care for us. And sometimes when a parent dies, then of course we pedestalize them and put them on a pedestal and create the perfect version of that father or mother that we might be missing out on. So, what happened with your mother? We can tell me if it's out of order. You
Sure.
can tell
No,
me
let's
whatever
do
you want.
my mother first, and then we'll
Okay.
circle back around to a few things that I had aha moments on with my father. So yeah,
Okay.
so my mother, she always gave her power away to men, and she also made excuses for my abusive uncle. I had some abuse experienced that brought on by my uncle. She made excuses for him, and she always prioritized the happiness of all men around her over me. And she often neglected my needs in lieu of making the men around her happy.
Hmm.
So that was the first thing. And I learned at an early age to give up my power, especially to men, and also to women, but more to men even than women. And I learned to abandon myself for others. And then the other last thing that I wanted to mention is my mother never honored my father's memory in a positive way. So she rarely talked about my father. And when she did say something, it was usually about his death. And my father was an only child, so there were no other aunts and uncles on my father's side to keep his memory alive.
Hmm.
And for various reasons, I think mental health issues, mostly my paternal grandparents also just weren't able to honor my father's memory for
Hmm.
me or my sister.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It's really important to keep the parent who's disappeared to keep their memory alive for a baby, especially if the parent has died and the baby's never known that person. And maybe some of you are thinking, well, the parent, the kid's father was a terrible person, whatever. You might not want to keep that memory alive. I know of some people making up a fake version of the parent for the child to keep them happy. There's probably different schools of thought about that because all of this basically ends up affecting your identity, your sense of self, because we are a product of both of our parents. And you learned how to give up your power to men from witnessing your mother do it, but we can give up our power in all sorts of ways and learn how to do it. I gave up my power to men because I would do anything in my world to keep my father happy. And so, he was the first man in my life. So I thought, yeah, okay, great. So this is how you keep people happy. And
Yeah.
so you can learn things in different ways, but this is the way it manifested for
Yeah.
Nancy.
And for sure, I gave up my power to my mom too because I felt like I had to conceal part of my identity to be in relationship with my mother.
Hmm.
And that caused a lot of shame. And I felt like there was an unspoken rule just to not talk about my father as a child and not identify with him in any way.
Did you
And
try to? What did you try to talk to your mom about your dad?
Um, I just really didn't feel like it was safe to do so, so I didn't. I mean, I asked a few times how he died. My mom would, I think, to protect us, would say his heart stopped because, it was kind of a traumatic thing. Um,
So when did
but
you learn about the alcohol poisoning? When did you learn the
yeah.
truth of
Um,
his?
yeah, I just want to mention one other thing. My mom remarried, and has to do with the identity as well. Concealing part of my identity to be in relationship with my mother. She had us take our stepfather's last name or surname, even though we weren't adopted. So that just compounded the feel
Strange.
like, I wasn't accepted for who I truly was. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even after my parents divorced, I was like, Mom, are you keeping Dad's name? And she did. She said, Well, yeah, I don't want a different surname than you and your sister. Now, I never took my husband's name, so I've always had a different surname than my children. So I didn't really understand that because I thought, but Mary, you're not married to him anymore. That's not your identity anymore. Why would you keep his name? But people are, different era also. So, but that's strange to have to take a stepfather's name that you're not even adopted by.
Yeah.
That would
And
be
it just caused
confusing.
a lot of confusion and guilt and shame and
Hmm.
just questioning, who I was. I just didn't feel accepted for who I was or safe to be who I truly was.
And so when did you find out the truth of your father's death?
Um, I think it came out in pieces. I don't even really remember when I found out it was alcohol poisoning. Probably around, I would say, like 18 or so. And then a couple of years ago, I was talking to my mom, and I just wanted to get some really positive things about my dad. And I asked a question to try to just find some light about him. And she told me more details about, the night that he died. Yeah. And I was, it was his birthday and it was Easter is the day he died, and he'd been out drinking. He'd had a drinking contest with his friends because it was his birthday, and my mom tried to get him to stop, but he wouldn't. And then they went to my mom's parents' house, so my maternal grandparents' house, and then he started like not being able to breathe, thrashing around in the bed, and I was in the bed at that point, and my mom had to pull me out of the bed. So I watched him take some of his last breaths. So yeah, that
I mean,
breathe.
we think that our kids aren't like, we think that our little babies aren't taking in all of this information, but they really are in some way, shape, or form. Your baby, your infant, even in utero, they're hearing everything that's going on. They feel the energy of, happy energy as opposed to frightened energy or upset energy. They pick up all of it. They understand more than you could possibly know. And if they could speak, they would probably say, "Stop behaving like children." They would say, "Come on, folks." Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Um, and so there was a lot of shame in your story because you took on the guilt of your father dying. You took on the shame of your mother tiptoeing around his secret, and then all of the things that you discovered. How did that impact you in the realizations of all of this?
yeah. So in my adult life, I first I had to learn, like unlearn what I learned from my mother about like self-abandonment and people pleasing and setting boundaries and standing up for myself. So that's something I learned. I also needed to learn how to value and accept myself and feel worthy of support and feel worthy of putting myself first. Um,
And how did that oath of silence, why do you think that triggered you so much?
because I felt like I was keeping secrets, the secret, of my true identity
Hmm.
was the main thing. And
Hmm.
I felt like I never felt comfortable honoring my father around my family, or celebrating him.
And of course, oath of silence. I don't know if the viewing and listening audience knows, but the oath of silence is not just about keeping secrets to ourselves and others, but it is our throat chakra, our voice is how we communicate and express in this life. And you all know that there's people who talk all the time and they talk really loudly and they never shut up. And then there's those people who speak really softly and you're always like, what? Speak up. And they don't really speak. There's also things about not wanting confrontation, people who just zip up when they really ought to speak out. There's all sorts of things that fall under this umbrella of the oath of silence. And it's one of the most important oaths that we have taken thousands of years ago that we clear in From Fear into Love. But sometimes if things aren't clearing, it's because there's something deeper. And if there's something deeper, obviously you're going to look to your parents and your childhood and your ancestors to find out what kind of uh, familial baseline have you been given to heal in this lifetime?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one other thing about the throat chakra that you mentioned in a recent meeting I had with you was the one of the first ways we give up our power is by keeping quiet or not saying what we want to say.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, think about all of the times that you've shut up. And I mentioned this, I think I was in a on a women's coaching thing and we were in a group and I mentioned this oath of silence and how some people even had either their fathers or their brothers or their boyfriend or whatever literally put their hand over their mouth or go, shh, nobody likes to be shushed, right? Or somebody took their braid and put it in their mouth and all sorts of ways that like really passive aggressive things all the time where we're told to be quiet,
Mhm.
told not to make noise, probably particularly girls too. I would dare to say. Hopefully not quite as much in this day and age, but it is still, unfortunately, man's world out there predominantly. So the whole shushing and being quiet and being sweet and just, being pretty and nice over there in the corner. And if that's not who you are, We need our voices to speak up because that's the only way change is going to be made. And you don't have to be a horrible person to speak up. You can speak up eloquently and with great intelligence and really make a very strong, solid point without any bitchiness involved, without any anger, without anything like that. You can be very strong and state your case. And often the hardest people it is to be strong and speak your voice to is your parents. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so, how did all of that impact your adult life?
Yeah. So, firstly, I really was a people pleaser and I didn't know how to set boundaries for myself. Um, and I didn't know how to stand in my power. And you don't have, like you said, you don't have to be bitchy to stand in your power. So there's that. And then I was also, I gave away my power easily to others as an empath. I would take on other people's stuff. I would take on other people's suffering. So, I've been coaching myself, even taking my father-in-law to his cancer treatments, like going in there with the other health practitioners when he's meeting with them and remembering not to absorb everybody else's stuff and not to absorb other people's suffering because I think that was part of what I needed to work on as an inner baby too, was to let go of my suffering, my mother's suffering, and my father's suffering.
Well,
Um,
as I recall, you came back and took From Fear into Love again all the way through the course as from the perspective of your inner baby. Am I
mhm.
making that up? No.
Yeah, I mean, I
No, you
didn't
did do
state
that.
that, but it was
Yeah.
like that's what was coming
Yeah.
through the whole time. Yeah, so
Mhm.
I did. I started it there. Yeah, and I guess let's see here what else. I just needed to realize that I could love how to love and nurture myself without guilt, and and that I also had inherent value and worth. And that I could accept myself. Um, and also, just in relation to my mother, I needed, for the inner child, I needed to clear my resentment and anger and forgive my mother and my stepfather for not supporting me because I just felt like I was abandoned over and over again.
Now, when Nancy talks about clearing that, the belief work, we call it belief work that we do in From Fear into Love, it is a process of somatic viewing and downloads so that you're basically rerouting your neural pathways in your brain so that if you've learned all of this behavior, and our behavior is how we think, respond, speak out about things, right? But if you've learned all of that, you can unlearn it and program in a different way. But just clearing things once is will make a big difference for some of the stuff because we all want to be loved, held, nurtured, adored, received, all of that. Maybe you don't have to work at too hard. Maybe some of you do if that's really your wounding. But this is a practice. This is why they call it a spiritual practice because it's it's like you don't just go on a diet for a day, right? You change your eating habits forever. And it's the same with healing work. So we're constantly peeling off the layers of onion skins. And even as you become more and more evolved and more clear, your same default wounding is still going to come up. And how it manifests might be different every time, but how you deal with it is going to change. The healing is changing your relationship with the wounding, changing your relationship with the parents so that when you learn to take a step back from the people who have wounded you, even though they were doing the best they could at the time, we realize that, well, we're not them, and how they are does not impact on me as an adult like I am a separate person from that person, so
Mhm.
that you can look at them a little bit more objectively. Well, ideally, this is what we're aiming towards, so that you're not triggered every time your mother opens her mouth, every time your father, you won't be like, oh God, here he goes again, and you're diving right back into that childhood wounding. It might still be annoying, your parents, but you can step back and look at them as like, okay, well, that's where she's at.
Yeah,
That's where he's at. This is where I'm at. I notice it. It's like that's their stuff. It's not my stuff anymore. So
exactly.
it's kind of a choice at the end of the day, how wounded you want to stay or how much you want to heal. So tell us about the inner baby work, because I think a lot of people are jumping right to the yes, yes, it all started from childhood. Okay, fine. But this is how I feel as an adult. So they're working from here
Mhm.
backwards. And that's fine. Work however you want to work. Just do something. Do anything to
Yeah.
heal. But inner child work, because that's where all of the wounding starts for
Mhm.
most of us, is really, really important. And you've done a whole lot of that. So why don't you talk to us about that?
Sure. Yeah, so it's really deep. When I've been working on my healing, sometimes I'm working on my adult, sometimes I'm working on my inner child, sometimes my inner baby. It just depends on, like what I've been working on with Shannon, what's going on in my life. Yeah, so inner baby is really deep. And having lost my father at 3 months old, I had a lot of sorrow, sadness, and grief that I was holding, and I was holding my mother's as well. Um, so Shannon, like I said before, taught me how to clear out my mother's grief. And I've slowly been working on getting the grief out of myself too. And one of the things that and this goes back to throat chakra again, that really helps me, besides addressing the actual issues, is doing the heart song, which is in Vianna Sable's book, Diseases and Disorders, which is a process of grounding and connecting with source, connecting with your heart, going into your heart space, feeling the emotions, and then releasing that through the tone of your voice.
Toning out sadness.
Yeah. And you always have to find a time to do it, because if you're not doing it underwater, you want to make sure there aren't other people around, so you're not like terrifying them or anything. But a lot
It
of the
brings up a lot of sadness, and in the process, you probably will cry a lot because you're tuning into all of your sadness. But the idea is not to have a big sob session, which is also really satisfying sometimes. But the idea is to stay in the toning out. Because sometimes when you're toning and tuning into a tone, you're toning in, you're bringing that tone into you. But this is really toning out. And I think doing any kind of release work is great in a bathtub because water is a great conductor, but your family might hear you crying away in the bathtub and think like, what's going on in there?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned one time you had a friend that did the either screaming or toning out in the forest, and then like afterwards the police were there looking for what happened.
Yeah,
Asked her if they knew.
I
Yeah,
think
go ahead.
it's a student client turned friend, and she's an opera singer. So she'd go out into the woods in England somewhere and be like, oh, like in the forest, just like letting it all out. And I guess someone else, said, "Oh, crazy woman banshee screaming in the forest."
Yeah, or they were concerned for someone's safety, but everything was okay. She didn't admit to it either, I don't think. To the police.
I liked screaming underwater, putting your face underwater and screaming, because that's also how I birthed. My second baby was in the water pool, so I was having the contractions underwater, and I felt it was really private. So I quite like that, but you can also do this in the shower. Anywhere you're probably not going to drown would also be a good move.
Yeah.
But getting this sadness out of your body, because sadness takes up space in your body. And I even heard one story from Vienna that somebody lost like 3 dress sizes. They were there in the bathtub toning out sadness for hours and hours. I only can ever manage about 20 minutes. And then I think, "Oh, okay, that's enough for now." But I don't just think, okay, I'm done, right? I'll go back and do it again.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so finish telling us this little bit about toning out sadness, and then we'll take a short break.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like I already covered the toning out. It's good to
Okay.
read the exercise in the book because it talks about specifically what you should say to source,
Mhm.
so to facilitate that process. But it's also important to drop into your heart and feel those feelings. And then when you're toning out, feel the sadness, the frustration, the anger. And then it can even be about, if it's not specifically about, your inner child or something you're working on, it can be about war or famine or
Oh,
anything like that too.
any anything that you
Mhm.
feel that you're holding, and right now in the world as it is, I'm sure we're all holding a lot of world stuff, world concern. Anything that is weighing heavy on you, you can go on in there and tone it out. Now, Nancy, if somebody wants to reach you to have a conversation with you, or even a healing session, if you're up for that, how can
Mhm.
they find you? This is your email address?
Yes. My email address is Nancy, Nancy, as in Mary, F as in, I'm sorry, that's my work email. It's Nancy M Forsyth 123 at gmail.com. And Forsyth is spelled Forsyth.
Yeah, I think your name is on the screen so people can
Yes.
see that. That's good. So you can contact Nancy if you want to speak to her any further, and if you'd like to work with me, or contact me and tell me about your birth story, because I'm always looking for guests on this show. Because just like we've been speaking about the throat chakra, when we share our stories with other people, it helps people have realizations like, oh, that sounds similar to my story. And it also helps us know that we're not alone in all of this, because sometimes we think I'm suffering silently. Nobody else knows how I feel. And yet there's loads and loads of other people who have similar, if not very same kind of stories. So you can contact me at shannonoflaherty.com or shannonbtb.com. So we're just going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll see you in 3 minutes. Hi, Shannon O'Flaherty here. Welcome back to Beyond Birth Trauma, from Burden to Brilliance, with my wonderful guest and good friend, Nancy Forsyth. And we've been talking about Nancy's story of healing and discovering things about her father, who died when she was only 3 months old. And so let's just continue with this interesting topic, which I'm sure is impacting a lot of people, because I know there's a lot of people who grew up without a dad or without a mom, or also had to tiptoe around their shame. In fact, let's talk about that tiptoeing around the shame thing for a little while, because a lot of families have a familial baseline, and I talk about this a lot in From Fear into Love, which usually comes from your ancestors. So my familial baseline was sadness and shame. Other people's might be anger and violence. Some people, and we're talking about negative baselines. Okay, some families have really super happy baselines also, but usually there's some kind of trauma in the line coming forward. And when we do the healing work in this lifetime, we are healing our ancestral line. And you might be holding stuff from your ancestors because we hold 7 generations of cellular memory, which still freaks me out to this day. Like, not hard enough just to be ourselves in this lifetime, but we're holding on to things that maybe your great grandmother didn't want to see, or that your great grandfather didn't want to hear, or family curses, or whatever. So it's really quite interesting to investigate the ancestral line. Oh, and we did that with you too, Nancy. We might want to touch on that too.
Yeah.
We've done everything. But so let's talk about that shame piece, because I remember when my dad didn't come back from Argentina with us, right? My parents split up at that point in time. And back then in the 70s, I guess it was the 70s, I seemed to be the only kid without a dad because not everybody was divorcing right, left, and center like it is now. And I felt ashamed about that, just that, not knowing anything else about it. And I didn't want to tell people that.
Yeah.
So how did that
Yeah. I mean,
materialize for you?
I felt shame because I wasn't honoring my father. I took a different name that wasn't legally mine to take. And I just it just didn't feel right. And what else about shame? And I did have shame too, just for not having a father.
And then when your mother, um, also you felt shameful about your mother because you witnessed her. Sometimes children don't understand that it's shame that they're feeling because they're witnessing something that is not congruent to what they think it's supposed to feel like. If you knew that it was wrong to take your stepfather's name, for example, like a little kid can't always
Mm.
make rational sense out of that, but something isn't adding up. And because our parents are our protectors, we have to trust them. So when our parents are lying to us or keeping the truth from us, inherently it makes us not trust our own knowing, because as children, we know that when mom's going, everything's fine, darling, that everything isn't fine. But we have to trust that our parents are telling the truth, because if our parents are lying to us, then it's all over. And so we start to mistrust what we know is true in order to give up our power to our parents. And that's just survival. That happens to everyone. Yeah. So what happened? You were in From Fear into Love one of those times, because I think you took my class every time I ran it. Very loyal. And so when the inner child stuff really came up, talk to
Mhm.
us about that learning.
Yeah. I well, I had a one-on-one session during the second From Fear into Love class because my mother had told me a lot of detail about my father's death, and I was just overwhelmed with it all. So I had a one-on-one with Shannon, and she scanned my energy, like my energy centers, and she said I was holding my wounding in my sacral chakra, which is like just below the belly button, which is like an energy spiral that we have. And when the sacral chakra is blocked, you can have digestive issues, problems with joy. I mean, there's a lot of things with it, but I think
The
that
seat of our power,
yeah,
basically. Your sacral
exactly.
chakra is our power center. It's your chi, it's
Yeah.
your sexual center, it's your,
hmm
you know.
And that was a big thing that I've come to realize lately is because my daily experience as a little baby was grief, sorrow, and sadness and fear. I didn't really know a lot about joy. I didn't know what it felt like. I had to have I asked God source to show me the definition of joy. Um, I didn't
That's a
know.
really good point. That's a really good point. I'm really glad you said that because a lot of these aren't just downloading, we're going to get rid of this trauma, that trauma. A lot of the things that we're downloading is teaching our body teaching ourselves what it feels like, right? To
Yeah.
be this is why we clear the fetal memories with every new client, every new student, because we want them to know what God's unconditional love feels like, what it's like to be wanted, nurtured, adored, cherished, safe, fully in your body, all of these things, because a lot of people might never have learned these things. Because if your parents never learned how to fully love unconditionally, how are they going to fully love you unconditionally or teach you how to fully love unconditionally? And if you grew up in a war zone, I'm thinking of extremes here, in a war zone or anything else, how, maybe you grew up in terror. Your parents were in terror, you had terror, or maybe you really didn't have any joy. What if you had two abusive parents or two drug addict parents or something where you weren't getting the nurturing that we need as babies to grow up stable, at least to some level,
Mhm.
right? So a lot of these things we can actually teach ourselves. So downloading joy is something that you taught
Mhm.
yourself so that you
Yep.
know it when you feel it.
Yep. And then you can also hold in your sacral chakra a lot of resentment and anger. And that was totally the theme of my childhood. I was angry a lot. I was angry at my stepfather for not, paying attention to me, for not having a positive, like a good relationship. He didn't really see me or pay attention to me, and he was hard of hearing, so he didn't really hear me either.
And you
So
were
yeah,
also secretly, subconsciously angry at him for not being your actual father.
exactly.
It's not conscious. Yeah.
No, thank you for those words. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me as the inner baby, I also am realizing that well, and I have been working on it, but now I'm kind of like feeling like I'm closing it out a little bit more is I had anger and resentment towards my actual father for him leaving me.
Hmm.
So I was able to clear that out and learn how to forgive and how to forgive him. I also needed to learn what it feels like for me as the inner baby to live without resentment and anger. So a lot of sacral chakra stuff with the and that's isn't that where the inner child is kind of held in the sacral chakra? Is that true
Well,
or
yeah, I mean, I talk about the root chakra because that's what we're born through. And then the sacral chakra is really up to sort of age 2. And so a lot of those early memories come through there. And if we weren't held or nurtured properly when we were babies, I mean, from the moment of that baby coming out and being put on the mother's skin, this has been scientifically proven how important that birth imprint is. But if your mother had a crazy mother, like if your grandmother was impossible and your mother was angry with her, you're going to be holding all of that kind of stuff. And it could affect your actual birth process, right? It can affect when you're a little kid. I mean, my sister and I talked about, do you remember mom, ever like really nurturing you? And both of us have one occasion where we both remembered being kind of held and mom being super loving. Now, I loved my mother. I worked really hard to love my mother and we had a great relationship near the end. But my mother, in her viewpoint, I know she felt her whole purpose was to mother and be loving and caring and nurturing. And I was just like, huh, really? Because, and she did care for other people and take care of them. But, something was missing there. And I knew all about my mother because we were confidants. So I know about her childhood wounding, but even though you think that you're being a certain way, the way that you energetically might be giving out your energy to others, you might not be being received in the way that you think that you're giving out. So nurturing, no, my sister and I didn't really have that experience with my mother, which
yeah.
was interesting. So the self-nurturing, a lot of healing especially if you're coming to it as an adult, when we start to go, why am I feeling despairing all the time? Right? You need to, there's a lot of self-healing and self-nurturing that needs to go on.
Yeah.
Even recently, when I had this huge realization, I don't know if you're all following me about going on the boat again, and terrified of big waves. And I went back to 6 years old and had this huge somatic release. It was fascinating. But again, I was there like, it's okay, little 6 year old Shannon, like really all of this is still coming out now. So it's all in there. It's
Yeah.
all in there, and it's
Yeah.
what you focus on your day to day to keep
Yeah.
you
And
spiraling down.
also lately I just realized that I didn't know what it felt like to live without stress for me as the inner baby, because it was just a stressful time, which can really affect your adrenals. And so I was glad to find that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was I was able to learn for me as the inner baby how to live without self-judgment,
Mm,
because I had a background program running where I was looking for something I did wrong to cause my father to leave.
oh,
And um, and it was an accident. I actually connected with my father one time, and I just said, "Just talk to me." And through clairaudience, I heard him say it was an accident.
mhm,
And that was helpful now that I look at that, because I needed to learn. I was, I guess, kind of blaming myself, or trying to. And so once I learned how, for me as the inner baby, how to live without self-judgment, then I was able to also do the download for how to accept my father's death.
mhm. It's really interesting because because we don't have the bigger picture and all of the facts, our world as children is quite small. It's home, it's with our siblings, it's with our parents, maybe our pets. But if when our parents leave in whatever way they leave, children will obviously think, oh, it's me. I've driven them away. And because what else, why else would your parent leave, right? I've been bad. I've been a bad kid. I'm a bad girl, whatever it is. So that's a very normal thing for young children to feel responsible. And even if parents say, oh, no, this isn't because of you, kids can't take on the bigger understanding of an adult mindset or mindsets or situations. So, of course, they will feel guilty and responsible. And also, another really important thing that you said there, Nancy, was about talking to the spirit of your father. And that's really important because our ancestors, everybody who has left this reality and are in spirit, are all there. They can tune into you just as easily as you can tune into them, and you can go up and talk to them every time. If you've ever worked with Anita Morjani, her story is really, really fascinating. And she takes people up to connect with their ancestors in spirit. I was really quite pleased to do that with her because it's very similar to how I teach to go up and connect with your ancestors. And I speak out loud to my mother pretty much every day. And I always, maybe it's not words like we're saying right here and now, but I hear her, or I get a knowing, or I have a feeling or something where I know that she's absolutely connecting with me. Sometimes I actually hear her voice. So go up and connect to your ancestors and ask them. See them in spirit and ask them whatever you need to ask them, and wait for an answer, because you'll receive something.
Yeah. And if it's best to do that when you're like in a quiet, peaceful state.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll do it like if I wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning. It's also good to ground and connect to source before you do that. But sometimes if you're just in a quiet, peaceful state, you'll be able to connect that way.
I like I like it when I'm out walking in the woods
Yes.
when I'm in nature and with the trees. That's always a really good time to go and talk to dead people, right? So, and what else did you learn in From Fear into Love that really was a game changer for you in your adult life?
Huh, there's just so many things. I did write some stuff down. Let's see if I can find anything else. Well, I mean, very importantly, that I needed to forgive myself for choosing this soul lesson too. Um, it sounds kind of weird that you have to forgive yourself, but you
Think it sounds
do.
weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, people think, why would we choose to come back to this earth? Because it's terrible. I love Earth, and I think that this is a great place to be. I know that there's a lot wrong with the world and Earth, but there's also a lot really amazing about it. So I focus on the things that make me joyous and happy. But a lot of people find it really hard to be here. And basically, your soul, when we come back to Earth, it's a split second. It's not like however many years it takes us to learn the lessons. We come back here to experience joy and to heal from past karmic experiences and traumas. And it's fascinating the work that I've done with that with people when it's clearly a past life thing. Mostly, if somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, I have this past life issue," I'm like, uh-huh, well, let's start with how it's manifesting in this life because we're here living this life. So it's really important to focus on the here and now and healing what's going on right here, right now, however it's manifesting. And then eventually we'll work our way back to the ancestral plane also. As I recall, I did go up your
Yes.
ancestral line.
You
I
went
don't
up
remember
my
why I was doing it.
maternal, so my mother's grandmother's mother's line,
Yeah,
back to like a great three greats, great
yeah.
great grandma. Because you had done like I can't remember what it's called, but you went back and connected and you told me because I was wondering, like, there's just been a lot of loss on both sides of my family, and I was just looking at my mother and her siblings and all the things they've experienced, and so I wanted to know if there was a curse on my mother's line.
Oh, yeah.
And so you went back and you connected with my great 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 grandma, and you said there was a loss of two. And
Two babies. Yeah. Oh, I
mhm.
remember that now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, you kind of did some healing and told my great 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 grandmother that, all was forgiven and everything's okay. And then after that, I went on to myheritage.com, which is like ancestry.com. And sure enough, there were two babies within, one was like an infant and one was less than 2 years old that died within like 5 or 6 months of each other. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah.
that was really cool. I mean, not cool that you had loss in your
No, but it was
family, but
interesting how it was connected like that.
it's amazing as a healer to get confirmation because these things can be very subtle sometimes. And sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is coming out of my mouth when it's just a knowing and I have no way to prove it. But it was pretty cool to get confirmation about past life stuff
Yeah.
in that scenario. So, was there anything else that you wanted to say real quick before I
Yeah.
offer our listening and viewing audience some
Sure.
downloads to?
Yeah, I just have a daily message. Just make sure that you love and value yourself every day and practice it daily.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it is a practice. Loving yourself and valuing yourself is a practice. Mirror work is really great. Look in the mirror. Don't go, "Ooh, look at all these wrinkles." Look in the mirror and go, "Wow, you're awesome. I love you. You're so amazing. I'm so happy I'm me." Right?
Mhm.
All that kind of stuff and really mean it. So if you're ready for some downloads now, put your feet flat on the floor, have a little sip of water if you've got some nearby, and put your palms up like you're ready to receive. And you don't need to be there floating around. So just lower them down so they're resting on your table or on your lap so that you're comfortable. You can have your eyes open or closed, whatever you want. I'm just going to close mine for one little moment and connect. I'm going to connect to source. If you want to receive this download, just say yes out loud after I say it. I know what it feels like to be valued.
Yes.
Yes. I know what it feels like to be safe.
Yes.
I know what it feels like to be held.
Yes.
I know what it feels like to forgive myself.
Yes.
I know what it feels like to forgive my parents.
Yes.
I know what it feels like to forgive God.
Yes.
I know what it feels like to celebrate myself.
Yes.
So allow those downloads to come through you. You might feel some tingling. And it's really a good idea to have a little mantra for yourself so that when you're triggered, because we all get triggered all the time. So when you're triggered, just feel what you feel, own it, and then just go up to your God, whatever that is for you, your higher being, and say, cancel that. And then remind yourself, I know what it feels like to be valued. I know what it feels like to be safe. All of those. Have a little mantra. I have a really low boredom threshold, so I always have a few things that I say all of the time, over and over and over and over. And in fact, I'll fall asleep that way at night. I'll have one hand on my heart, one hand on my sacral chakra, which is just here under your belly button. And I'll fall asleep like that with my mantra over and over and over again. You know, I'm safe, I'm loved, I'm happy, I'm free, I'm joyous, whatever it is. And you always say it in the positive present condition as though it's happening now. And this is the practice because your neural pathways have been going a certain way for however old you are. And at the end of that, there's a receptor that holds that in place. So the download breaks that and creates a new neural pathway. But unless you practice sending that energy up the new neural pathway, it's just going to grow back because it's been more trodden. So that's basically the work. It's very easy. The practice takes a little bit more doing, but the more you practice, the better at it you do. So thank you so much, Nancy, for being with us today on this show. And I'm so grateful to have you working with me.
Thank you. So grateful for you as well and everyone listening.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Lots of love.
Bye.
You have been listening to Beyond Birth Trauma, From Burden to Brilliance with Shannon O'Flaherty on Transformation Talk Radio. On the second Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, we connect the dots between your ancestors, your birth, and the patterns that keep you stuck, guiding you to a place of profound healing and unstoppable brilliance. By examining and healing your cellular imprint from birth of how you perceive and respond to the world and the challenges that are created in your day-to-day life, we can begin to heal and live more balanced and fulfilling lives. For more information, visit shannonbtb.com. That's shannonbtb.com.